They found it in the attic, buried beneath dust and time. A family Bible no one remembered owning. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Cracked leather, yellowed pages, the faint smell of age. But then, the names appeared, written in careful ink, one after another, were the family's children, except some of them hadn't been born yet. Years later, every single name written in those pages came true, each child arriving exactly as recorded, down to the day. And when the list continued, stretching further than anyone alive could understand, the family realized the Bible wasn't just recording history, it was predicting it. But one night, they turned to the final page and saw names that should never have existed. Names that screamed of tragedy, betrayal, and but the Bible found in the Whitmore household was no ordinary keepsake. Its leather binding carried a weight that no book should bear, and its pages told more than prayers or scripture. They told the future. At first, the family dismissed it as an old heirloom, a relic of ancestors long gone. But the ink on those pages was too fresh, too deliberate. It began on a rainy afternoon in 1962, when 12-year-old Margaret Whitmore was playing hide and seek with her cousins in the creaking attic of her grandmother's farmhouse. The air smelled of mildew and wood rot, the kind of dampness that makes your skin prickle. Dust floated in the beams of pale light, breaking through cracked shingles. While searching for a place to hide, Margaret stumbled upon a wooden trunk shoved into the farthest corner. Its lid was heavy, locked with a rusted clasp, but curiosity pushed her to pry it open. Inside, beneath moth-eaten quilts and faded photographs, lay a thick, leather-bound Bible. Its cover was cracked like dry earth. The edges of its pages curled from decades of neglect. Margaret lifted it, surprised by its unnatural weight. Something about the book felt alive, as though it was aware of being disturbed. When she carried it downstairs to her grandmother, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Where did you find this?" No one had seen the Bible in decades, not since her great-grandfather's mysterious death. That night, the family gathered around the dining table as the storm raged outside. Candlelight flickered, throwing shadows across the pages as Margaret's father opened the Bible. At first, it seemed ordinary. Lists of births, marriages, and deaths, neatly written in faded ink, like any family Bible. But the further they turned, the stranger it became. The names of children appeared, names of Margaret's siblings, cousins, even her own. Some were alive, others still babies in the womb. All were written years before their births, the exact dates recorded beside them. Margaret's mother gasped, her hand instinctively clutching her pregnant belly. because written on the next line, beneath Margaret's name, was one more. Eleanor Whitmore. Ever even discussed. Yet here it was, already decided. The family exchanged horrified glances. The room grew cold, the candles flickering violently, as if the storm outside had seeped into the walls. It was then they realized the Bible was not a record of the past. It was a record of the future, and it had only just begun to reveal itself. For weeks, the family tried to convince themselves it was nothing more than coincidence. The Bible was old. Perhaps the names had been added later by some distant relative. But doubt began to eat at them in the quiet hours of the night. Margaret's mother, Sarah, could not shake the thought of the name Eleanor waiting for her unborn child. She had dreamed of naming her baby Grace, a name that symbolized light after hardship. Yet every time she opened the Bible, the word Eleanor seemed to glow with an authority that dared her to defy it. When April came, the storm outside matched the chaos within the farmhouse walls, thunder rattling the windows as new life fought its way into the world. At last, the baby was born. The doctor placed a small, wailing girl in Sarah's trembling arms. Everyone waited for her to whisper the chosen name, but the word Grace would not leave her lips. Instead, without knowing why, she looked at the child and breathed, Eleanor. A hush fell over the room. Margaret's father turned pale, remembering the page in the Bible. Against all plans, against all intentions, the prophecy had been fulfilled. From that day, the Bible was no longer an heirloom. It was a curse. The family tried to hide it again, locking it deep within the trunk in the attic. But Margaret could not forget. The way the ink seemed fresher than the rest. Fell ill that summer. Doctors said it was scarlet fever, and though his parents prayed desperately, his condition worsened by the day. On the night he passed away, Margaret's father, driven by a dark compulsion, returned to the attic. He flipped to the Bible's final entries and saw Daniel's name written there, along with his exact date of death. It had been written all along. The family began to fear the book as though it were alive, whispering their futures in silent ink. Yet no one could bring themselves to burn it. Each attempt failed. The matches fizzled. The pages refused to catch. It was as if the Bible was protected by something far beyond human power. Soon, the Whitmores would learn that not every name recorded in those pages would live to see the light of day. Some names were written only to remind the living of how fragile life truly was. Into lives not yet imagined. As the years passed, the Bible's predictions became an unspoken shadow, hanging over every Whitmore gathering. Birthdays were celebrated with cautious joy. Marriages felt less like beginnings and more like sentences carried out from a script already written. Nobody spoke of it openly, but in every glance and every silence, lingered the same question. Who is next? Margaret grew older, and her curiosity grew with her. One cold November night, she crept into the attic again. Lantern in hand, the Bible waited for her, exactly where it had always been, as though it wanted to be found. Her fingers trembled as she opened to the back pages. More names filled the lines now. Nieces, nephews, was listed with a death date only a year away. Margaret's stomach nodded as she read it. The ink, so dark, it seemed almost freshly written. She wanted to deny it, to close the book and pretend she hadn't seen. But when the following autumn arrived, Thomas collapsed in the fields, his heart giving out without warning. The Bible had claimed him. Whispers spread among the family. Some believed the book was a divine gift, a holy relic revealing God's will. Others believed it was cursed, a demonic object feeding on their lives like a parasite. Regardless, none could escape its grip. Every new name brought both dread and inevitability. Margaret's dreams grew troubled. She often woke at night to the sound of pages turning, though the Bible remained written with a date, not of birth, but of death. He was only 10 years old. The family fell into despair, watching him like a hawk, guarding him from every possible danger. But as the date approached, Samuel grew weaker, coughing blood, his eyes sinking into shadows. Despite every doctor's effort, the boy died exactly when the Bible foretold. The family realized then, knowledge of fate did not grant power to change it. The Bible wasn't warning them, it was sentencing them. And deeper within its pages, the ink continued to stretch, recording generations yet unborn, sealing futures long before they arrived. By the late 1970s, the Whitmore family lived under the Bible's shadow, as if it were a living member of the household. Every holiday, every gathering, every christening, Margaret, now a grown woman, tried to distance herself. She left the farmhouse, married a man who had never even seen the cursed book, and moved miles away. For a few blissful years, she lived without its grip. But the curse followed. On her wedding night, her husband's aunt brought a gift, an heirloom quilt passed down through generations. When Margaret unfolded it, a slip of parchment fluttered to the floor. Scrawled across it, in the same spidery handwriting she knew too well, was her unborn child's name. The Bible had reached her, even across distance. When her son Daniel was born, Margaret swore she would never expose him to the... Later that night, Margaret could could not sleep. The book seemed to pulse faintly in the candlelight, its cover twitching as though something inside wanted out. Against every instinct, she lifted the cover and turned to the newest entries. Names spilled across the pages. Her children's, her grandchildren's, even people she had never met. But worse than that were the dates beside them. Some stretched years into the future, others only days away. Margaret's breath caught when she found her husband's name. Richard Whitmore, December 2nd, 1979. That was only a week away. She slammed the book shut, heart pounding. For days, she refused to believe it. She begged Richard not to leave the house, not to drive, not to tempt fate. But fate, it hacking at it with an axe, burying it deep in the woods. Each time it returned. Once it reappeared on her doorstep, slick with morning dew, though the skies had been dry. Another time, she woke in the middle of the night to find it resting on her chest, its pages open to her own name. That was when she realized something horrifying. No one in the family was writing these names. The ink appeared by itself, steady and deliberate, as though guided by an unseen hand. Whatever force possessed the Bible was not finished. It was still writing, still deciding, still waiting. By the 1980s, the Whitmore family had dwindled. Too many names had been crossed from the pages, too many graves filled exactly as the Bible foretold. The farmhouse, once alive with the sound of children, echoed with silence. In every flicker of the lanterns when the wind howled outside, it was in those lonely nights that the whispers began. At first, they were faint, almost like the sigh of wind through the cracks in the attic. But soon they became clear. Soft voices calling her name, urging her to open the chest. "Margaret," they hissed. "Margaret, look!" She resisted for weeks, covering her ears, praying until her voice broke. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the rooms like invisible guests. Finally, unable to endure it, she opened the chest. The Bible waited as always, its leather cover pulsing faintly as though it contained a heartbeat. When she opened it, the whispers ceased. Instead, the silence pressed in, thick, suffocating. On the page before her, new lines had appeared, names she did not recognize. Not family's fate. It was weaving the lives of outsiders, drawing them into its net. And then she saw it. At the bottom of the page was written, "Margaret Whitmore, final witness." No date, just those chilling words. That night, she awoke to footsteps in the attic, heavy, deliberate, pacing back and forth. When she crept upstairs with a lantern, the air was thick with cold, her breath misting in the beam of light. The chest was open. The Bible lay on the floorboards, its pages fluttering wildly, though the air was still. And over the roar of her pounding heart, she heard it clearly, a chorus of voices, whispering prayers and cries of despair in languages she did not know. The voices grew louder until she collapsed to her knees, clutching her ears. "What do you want from me?" she screamed. The fluttering pages stopped. The Bible lay open on one name: Eleanor Whitmore, her sister. The date she begged her not to leave the house, not to go near the road, not to ignore the warning. But just after sunrise, Eleanor stepped outside to fetch the morning paper. A delivery truck skidded on ice, veered off the road, and struck her where she stood. The Bible had claimed another life. For Margaret, the whispers did not fade. They only grew bolder, as though feeding on her grief. And deep in her heart, she understood the truth. The Bible wasn't just predicting death. It was orchestrating it. After Eleanor's death, Margaret began to notice something more sinister. The Bible was no longer content to simply reveal what was to come. It seemed to be directing the events, bending the world to its will. Every tragedy aligned too perfectly. Every accident felt too deliberate, keeping it hidden beneath the cedar chest in the attic. But no matter where she placed it, the Bible would return to her. She once left it at a church, desperate to rid herself of it. Yet the following morning, it was back on her kitchen table, the cover damp with holy water, pages open as though mocking her attempt. The whispers became unbearable. They no longer came only at night, but followed her in daylight. Soft, beckoning voices that grew louder whenever she resisted. One evening, as she tried to pray, her own voice was drowned out by a whisper that hissed from the shadows. "Obey." The candlelight sputtered and died, and in the darkness, Margaret felt the brush of unseen hands across her shoulders. Terrified, she opened the Bible once more. The words bled into the page like fresh ink, staining her vision until she could see nothing else. Margaret begged the local priest for help. Father Collins, an elderly man with years of faith behind him, agreed to see the Bible. But the moment he touched it, he recoiled as though burned. "This is not of God," he whispered, crossing himself. "This is something older, something that masquerades as holy." He urged Margaret to flee, to leave the house and never return. But she knew the truth. It didn't matter where she went. The Bible would follow. That night, Margaret dreamed of her ancestors. She saw faces stretching back centuries, each holding the Bible in trembling hands. They were all staring at her, their mouths moving in unison, whispering words she couldn't understand. She felt her will slipping. It was not just fear. It was compulsion. Her hands moved on their own, tracing the letters. Her lips whispering the names written on the page. She realized the Bible did not simply demand acknowledgement, it demanded obedience. And those who resisted would not only meet death, they would be erased, forgotten, as though they had never lived at all. Margaret became consumed by the Bible's grip. Days blurred into nights, her mind unraveling under the constant whispers. The book seemed to breathe in her presence, its pages fluttering, though no wind stirred the air. She kept it locked in the cedar chest, but still she heard it. Pages turning, ink scratching, as if the names were writing themselves in the dark. One evening, unable to bear the torment, she forced herself to defy it. She opened the Bible and found her son Daniel's name written with a date of death only days away. Panic seized her. She hid Daniel away in a neighboring town, forbidding him to return. For 3 nights she prayed, confident she had beaten the curse. But on the 4th day, the phone rang. Daniel had been struck by a car on his way to school. The exact date, the exact time, written in the Bible's pages. Margaret collapsed, screaming until her voice gave out. It didn't matter how far Daniel had gone. The Bible had found him. It was then she realized the truth. The book did not predict events. She woke to find her walls scrawled with words in black ink, identical to the Bible's handwriting. They covered the plaster, the furniture, even the glass of her mirror. Obey, obey, obey. Margaret began to lose her grip on reality. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Neighbors reported hearing screams from her house at all hours. Sometimes she was seen standing motionless at the window, Bible in hand, her lips moving as though reciting names only she could see. One stormy night, lightning split the sky and the farmhouse shuddered. Margaret opened the Bible to find her own name written again, this time with a date, tomorrow. She tried to run. She packed a bag, left the house, and fled into the woods. Yet no matter how defiance carried a price, and the Bible had already decided how she would pay. The night before the date, written beside her name, Margaret lit every candle in the farmhouse. The flickering glow stretched shadows across the walls. Shadows that seemed to move even when she stood still. She clutched the Bible in her trembling hands, terrified to open it again, yet unable to resist. The voices were louder than ever now, not whispers, but chants. And the book, slipping from her grasp, it hit the floor with a sound far too heavy for paper and leather, as though a body had fallen. The candles flickered violently, some snuffing out, the room choking in sudden darkness. And then she felt it. A hand, cold, bony, unseen, gripped her wrist, and guided it toward the pen on the table. She fought to pull away, but her muscles betrayed her, trembling as though she were a puppet on invisible strings. The Bible's pages opened by themselves, the inkwell beside it bubbling, though it had been dry for years. Her hand dipped the pen. The unseen grip forced her to write. The first letter scratched across the page, jagged and uneven. M. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the storm outside, the chanting voices rising in victory. She dropped the pen and stumbled away, her heart pounding. But when the clock struck midnight, the voices ceased. Silence pressed heavy against her ears. For the first time in months, there was no whisper, no turning of pages, no weight in the air. Margaret almost believed it was over, until she saw the final line. Beneath her name, in bold, unshakable ink, appeared the words, "The blood of the witness seals the book." Margaret barely had time to scream before the lanterns shattered. Flames erupted across the room, devouring curtains, crawling up the wooden beams. The farmhouse burned like a pyre, the storm outside howling as if in approval. Neighbors rushed at dawn to find nothing but ashes. In the ruins, untouched by fire, lay the Bible, open, unscathed, waiting for the next hand to find it. And on its final page, beneath the list of the dead, a new space had already appeared, empty, waiting for the next name. The fire should have ended. Watching the farmhouse collapse into glowing embers, they mourned Margaret, whispering that she had lost her mind after too many tragedies. None of them spoke of the screams carried on the wind, or of the strange chanting some claimed to hear rising from the flames. By morning, the place was nothing more than ruins, but the Bible endured. When the ashes cooled, a boy from the village crept into the wreckage, hoping to find something worth keeping. What he discovered instead was the leather-bound book, its cover unscorched, its pages untouched. He carried it home, unaware of the curse he now held in his small hands. His mother, upon seeing it, gasped, for on the very first page, written in thick black ink, was her son's name. The Whitmore curse had not ended with Margaret. It had only shifted hosts, sometimes appearing on a doorstep with no explanation. Always it carried names. Always the dates came true. Some tried to destroy it, burn it, tear it, bury it in consecrated ground, but the Bible returned, each time more defiant than before. In one account, a man who struck it with an axe was found dead the next day, his chest split open as though the wound had mirrored his attack. In another, a priest who locked it away inside a cathedral vault awoke the next morning to find it lying beside his bed. And with every new keeper, The list of names grew longer. Not just families now, but strangers, townsfolk, even entire communities. Deaths and tragedies multiplied, each recorded before they happened, each inevitable. The book no longer belonged to one bloodline. It belonged to humanity. Others swore they saw their own names written before their eyes. And though many refused to admit it, there was always a terrible temptation to look, to know one's fate, even if it meant surrendering to it. Because once you opened the Bible, you could never unsee what was written. The last confirmed sighting was decades later, when it surfaced in a small antique shop. The owner, curious about its age, displayed it in the front window. Customers flocked to see the strange relic. Its pages, lined with names you do not know. Be careful, because the moment you open it, the Bible begins to write, and the next name could be yours.